Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to unpack one of the most explosive education scandals in recent history, the 2026 NEET crisis. Now, this wasn't just some minor administrative glitch. We're talking about a sprawling, massive controversy that literally brought India's medical education system to a screeching halt. It sparked huge nationwide protests and triggered a really high-stakes political showdown. We're going to map out exactly how a medical entrance exam escalated into a full-blown national emergency, focusing right in on that chaotic, rapid escalation from the initial leaks in mid-May all the way to the absolute legislative deadlock we saw on July 23rd. So, let's dive into this incredible escalation by jumping straight to the climax. Imagine the scene on July 2026, right in the heart of New Delhi. The monsoon session of Parliament is just getting underway, but outside, the streets look like an active battleground. You really have to ask yourself, how does an academic test for aspiring young doctors lead to riot police, heavy barricades, and total political chaos? Well, what started as an academic grievance totally transformed into a massive youth uprising. Over 10,000 desperate students and activists launched the Sunset Chalo, or March to Parliament rally. The sheer physical force of the crowd actually breached the initial security barricades near the Constitution Club, and things escalated really fast. To maintain order, security forces deployed tear gas, water cannons, and aggressive lathi charges to push the youth back. This violent clash resulted in dozens of severe injuries to both protesters and police, and it ultimately shut down 16 Delhi metro stations, bringing the entire capital to a standstill. Section 1. Tracing the May leaks. To understand how we reached such a violent boiling point in July, we have to rewind to the root cause in mid-May and look at the sheer scale of the system that broke down. The crucial point here is this staggering number, 2.27 million. That is over 2.25 million aspirants who sat for the NEET exam on May 3rd. These are kids who dedicated years of their lives, sacrificing everything, to compete for just 130,000 available medical seats. And the crazy part, they were sitting for this exam completely unaware that the very system they trusted was already fundamentally compromised from the inside. The mechanics of this leak were just astonishingly brazen. Almost immediately after the test ended, reports of so-called guest papers started circulating like wildfire on WhatsApp. Now, this wasn't some nationwide simultaneous hack. It was heavily concentrated around specific coaching hubs like Sikar, Rajasthan. When educators actually looked at these circulating documents, one chemistry teacher noticed that nearly 140 questions perfectly matched the real exam. These weren't lucky guesses. These exact papers were allegedly being sold to desperate families for up to 15 lakh rupees a pop. Facing undeniable evidence of a massive breach, the National Testing Agency officially canceled the entire exam on May 12th. And the sheer scale of the network uncovered by the Central Bureau of Investigation is just wild. When the CBI took over, they didn't find rogue hackers sitting in a basement. They found trusted, deeply embedded insiders. Look at this list. You have an actual NTA translator, P.V. Kulkarni, allegedly running underground classes dictating exact answers. You have Manisha Havildar, a school headmistress, confessing to printing leaked material on her own school's computers, and coaching owners allegedly receiving questions back in late April. It was a sprawling, highly organized paper mafia operating right under everyone's noses. This timeline, bridging mid-May to mid-July, is a story of rapid, absolute chaos. Once the CBI probes kicked off on May 12th, the government was scrambling. But the panic created a really dark opportunity, and scammers started promising fake re-exam questions for even more cash. It got so bad that by June 16th, the government actually ordered a temporary, nationwide block on the Telegram app just to stop the hemorrhage of misinformation. This frantic attempt to containment set the stage for a highly anticipated retest on June 21st, which, as we know, led right into the explosive July clashes. Section 2. The retest and glitches. The government's immediate response was to organize a massive retest in late June to salvage the academic year. And security was pushed to the absolute limit. They even used Indian Air Force planes to securely transport the physical question papers. But despite the fighter jets and the heightened security, the trust was completely gone. As you can see here, over 270,000 candidates, more than 250,000 kids, simply refused to show up. Attendance plummeted to 87.72%, the second lowest since 2020. Widespread disillusionment and technical glitches had clearly taken a severe toll. Section 3. Rise of the cockroach movement. All this frustration didn't just fade away. It gave birth to a highly organized, youth-led political response that took the establishment completely by surprise. Enter the Cockroach Jantara Party, or the CJP. Founded by digital strategist Abhijit Dipaka, it might have started with a satirical name, but their demands were incredibly serious. They quickly mobilized millions of Gen Z Indians who felt the system was literally auctioning off their futures. Starting in early June, they launched massive physical demonstrations in New Delhi, demanding immediate accountability from the very top. But, as we navigate all this complex political maneuvering, we have to pause and talk about the devastating human toll. The immense psychological pressure of the leaks, the sudden cancellations, and the fierce competition for those limited seats resulted in over a dozen tragic student suicides across the country. It's truly heartbreaking. The weight of these shattered dreams pushed protesters to desperate measures. Activists and student leaders actually resorted to indefinite hunger strikes, whisking their lives on the pavement in New Delhi just to force the government to listen.
I am still alive. That haunting message came from prominent environmentalist and education reformer Sonam Wangchuk. On June 28th, he joined the CJP agitation and began an indefinite hunger strike. By July 18th, his 21st day fasting without food, Delhi police forcibly removed a severely weakened Wangchuk from the protest stage and rushed him to a hospital. But physically removing him only intensified the nationwide outrage. It prompted the CJP founder to launch his own Fast Unto Death, which acted as the critical catalyst for the violent July 20th Parliament March.
Section 4. Government and Political Fallout. By late July, the hunger strikes, the tragic deaths, and the violent clashes forced the crisis directly onto the floor of the Indian Parliament. The political fallout was unavoidable, but looking at this comparison, you can see a severe disconnect. The protesters demanded immediate political accountability, specifically the resignation of Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan, an independent probe, and compensation for families. But the government's actions focused heavily on law enforcement and technical fixes, pointing to the CBI arrests, the Telegram ban, and a transition to computer-based testing by 2027. This massive disconnect in priorities perfectly set the stage for July 23, 2026. As the monsoon session of Parliament resumed, the political crossfire reached its absolute peak. With the desperate CJP protesters still outside, inside the Parliament walls, national leaders drew very firm, unforgiving lines in the sand. It resulted in a complete legislative deadlock, with the highest levels of government grinding to a halt over the compromised futures of millions of students. The leader of the opposition, Rahul Gandhi, vehemently echoed the demands of the youth protesters. He framed the systematic leaks as an unforgivable crime against the youth, famously comparing the entire examination process to an auction for the rich. As you can read here, he pushed aggressively for the immediate dismissal of the education minister, blaming the current administration for allegedly protecting the paper mafia and destroying the education system. On the exact same day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the escalating issue. He assured the public that the government engaged expert lawyers to ensure strict punishment for anyone involved, stating firmly that those who harmed the youth would not be spared. He urged political unity to fix the system and create a foolproof environment, rather than politicizing the students' anguish. So the government's strategy rested on balancing aggressive law enforcement with sweeping future technological overhauls. And that brings us to the ultimate question. As the dust settles on the tear gas and the political shouting matches echo through the monsoon session, we're left looking toward a really uncertain future. The government promises that moving to a fully digital exam in 2027 will solve the problem. But after a breach of trust this massive, one that cost families their life savings and cost some students their very lives, we have to ask, can technology alone rebuild the shattered dreams of millions of young people? Or is a much deeper systemic reform required? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning what you learn.